So last night, Friday, September 15th, 2017, at 6:38 p.m., John Carmichael, Ph.D., Chief of Staff and Secretary to the Board of Trustees in the Office of the President of the Evergreen State College, sent an email to all staff and faculty that reads, "Dear faculty and staff, working with the State Attorney General's Office and the state's Office of Risk Management, the college reached an agreement today with Brett Weinstein and Heather Hang to resolve their $3.8 million tort claim. They have resigned from their faculty positions at Evergreen effective today. The college will pay them a total of $450,000 and contribute an additional $50,000 toward their attorney fees. The payment will be managed by the state's Office of Risk Management. In making this agreement, the college admits no liability and rejects the allegations made in the tort claim. The educational activities of day of absence/day of presence were not discriminatory. The college took reasonable and appropriate steps to engage with protesters during spring quarter, de-escalate conflict, and keep the campus safe. This agreement is in the best interests of Evergreen. Years of expensive and time-consuming litigation would not help us achieve our mission. As we welcome students and faculty back to campus, let's focus on strengthening our academic community, revitalizing our curriculum, and advancing our equity initiatives to become a more student-ready college that is welcoming to all. Evergreen faculty and deans are working diligently to provide options to students who will be affected by these resignations. The deans will communicate with affected students by Monday. I am grateful for the many staff and faculty who have worked this summer to collect and preserve documents as required by the litigation hold notice associated with this tort claim. Please continue to maintain these records pending further instructions. Signed, or given 2 dashes, John. Now, I don't want to talk about the money part. I'm not a money man, and all I really understand is that Brett and Heather have lost their careers at this point, and that there is a certain amount of sum that's reasonable as reimbursement for the loss of their financial security. But the second paragraph is where I would like to begin my talk. I do think that it's interesting that John Carmichael led with the money. He put the money right up there, so we all see that this is all about money, right? And then we go into the allegations, which they admit no liability for, and reject these allegations. And what allegations? The educational activities of day of absence, day of presence were not discriminatory. Now, I want to read some of the workshops that were offered during the day of absence, day of presence event. One is called Islamophobia and Asian Muslims. And the description reads, "We will examine the prevalence of Islam in Asia and the diversity these identities can hold. We will also examine from both personal and academic perspectives how Asian Muslims fit into the conversation of Islamophobia in the U.S. and how our cultural identities can oftentimes shield us from it. With this in mind, we will explore the ways colorism in Asia sets the stage for Asians embracing anti-blackness in the U.S. and the awareness that Islamophobia is deeply rooted in anti-blackness and long predates 9/11. Now, I find it fascinating that they are saying that a prejudice against religious is deeply wedded to a prejudice against a race. I think that they are putting front and center anti-blackness, which is not in and of itself discriminatory, but I do think that centering on the negativity more and more and more by embracing anti-blackness, anti-oppression, anti-racism, and putting that front and center, what you're going to do is to allow for discrimination to occur against those groups who are the least black and the most prevalent, because we're looking for oppression, we're looking for racism, and we are decidedly defending the most marginalized. So, like I've constantly said what intersectionality does, it separates out the majority and says, this is the enemy. The majority is that which oppresses us. The majority is that which has the most prejudice against us, against all these other minorities. So it takes all these minorities and it forms a super minority majority, right? But that super minority majority, at first, it's made in distinction to the majority, but then very quickly it needs to coalesce into a hierarchy. And how the hierarchy forms is by putting the most marginalized on top and the least marginalized on the bottom. So what you do, and this shows up in this document, that Asians are the most like the white, and so they must learn that they are subservient to that which is not white. Through deeply embedded shame, they must submit themselves to the hierarchy, this new hierarchy. And the hierarchy is very explicitly, it's black. It's black in these documents. And I find it that it's unfortunate that Day of Absence, Day of Presence has become, it started as a way to highlight the importance and the contributions of the black community to America, and now it's switched into highlighting and hyphenating the sins and the aggressions of the white of the white society, right? So it's no longer for the black community. It's no longer a way of bringing together and showing the vivacity and the cultural and the contributions of black society. It's about denigrating white society. And I think that that is implicitly, if not explicitly, discriminatory. And to buttress this, another workshop that they offered during the Day of Absence, Day of Presence, was called Identifying Anti-Blackness in Yourself and Your Intimate and Sexual Relationships. The description reads, in this workshop, we seek to explore, discuss, and strategize action against the propagation of anti-blackness within our sexual and intimate relationships. We will use group reflection activities, discussion, and look at research to synthesize and think about this anti-blackness and its reflection upon ourselves and our bodies. Now, this might be out of nowhere. This might be completely off base. But when proponents of an ideology seek to embed that ideology into people's sexuality, you're entering into a realm of psychology that goes very, very deep. If you can imprint shame into somebody's sexual desire, you can basically control them. And what you do by that shame, by wedding somebody's sexuality to this ideology, you're putting the mind and the belief in this ideology over top that sexual energy. And what that sexual energy does is it gets bundled up, it becomes frustrated, but it submits itself and it sublimates itself to this ideology. And so it strengthens one's personal relationship to this ideology. It's a very tried and true method of cult leaders and indoctrination to get people's sexuality under the control of the thought police. And what's the seed of this workshop? It's about anti-blackness. It's not exploring representations and black sexuality and different modes of black sexuality. It's looking at negativity. It's seeking negativity, which again, it will lead, whether explicitly or implicitly, to discrimination. It's running on discrimination. Another workshop, a 101 on race and microaggressions, how white supremacy invalidates us. The description. Oftentimes, racism is talked about in very academic senses that are inaccessible to people who haven't studied race and cultural studies. This workshop is designed to give words to our experiences, especially regarding microaggressions, discuss how creating academic terms for racism is a tool of white supremacy, and have an open forum discussion regarding racism. This is a workshop designed for people that haven't studied race and ethnicity competency. Now, this is a very weird one. This again exhibits the logic that I've been critiquing in these videos, this progressive logic. They want to discuss how creating academic terms for racism is a tool of white supremacy by discussing microaggressions which is an academic term. They want an academic workshop to discuss how academia is inherently white supremacists, which I think will lead one to form a prejudice against academia and to say that it's white supremacy. To conflate academia and science with white supremacy is, again, it's reducing this tool that we've developed, that everybody's developed, and we've developed this language of academia, this language of science, to codify knowledge in a certain way. And we've done it in such a way that I think that everybody can learn how that happens so that we can all participate in this project of learning and knowledge. And to take that entire project and to accuse it of supremacy, of white supremacy, accuse it inherently of racism, will lead to a racist prejudice in the people who internalize that view, to use their terms. So again, I think this is evidence of discrimination. And here's the crowning jewel of this non-discriminatory event. This workshop is titled, How Asian Americans Contribute to White Supremacy. Description. This workshop will provide a brief history of Asian American presence in this occupied land. We will work to understand the model minority construct as well as the cultural, economic, and political ways Asian Americans aid white supremacy and derail justice in this country. We'll also discuss some amazing Asian American idols to look up to and research how to aid the movement and how solidarity and action exists in our history. Apparently, Asians are on the lowest rung of the oppression hierarchy. Asians and probably even Jews are even lower than Asians because they're the model minority. And I'm not equipped right now to talk about the model minority thing, but I wonder if what's subliminally happening with this model minority is that what this whole movement might be about is looking at other people and saying, these other races got ahead, and they got ahead explicitly by keeping these other races down. And not to say that that doesn't exist, either on a micro or a macrocosmic level, but I think it would be more productive to say, how are these other groups getting ahead? What behaviors have they internalized in their culture that allows them to be successful? Instead of investigating that, you just say that the game is rigged and that success is proof of oppression, that success itself is proof of discrimination and is proof of a negative oppressive behavior. And that might be the case, but it seems like it's only one way of looking at the world. It's not a holistic way of looking at how success occurs. And it gives rise to people demanding all these rights, demanding all these benefits, like the protesters did. They demanded all these benefits from the administration, from the community, from the state and from the federal government. They're demanding all this stuff while at the same time disparaging these systems. They want the benefits of the systems without figuring out how the systems might benefit them by the means of certain sorts of behaviors that allow other people to benefit through the system. Not to say that the system isn't perfect, but to just say that the system is completely rigged. I don't think it's healthy, and I don't think it's an accurate depiction of how success functions. Here's another one that doesn't make any sense to me. Decolonizing gender. This workshop will introduce the ways we internalize, reproduce, and manifest colonization through dominant ways of knowing gender. This workshop is a space to name and make visible the ways white European settler ideology dominates indigenous ways of being. Now, the thing is, one workshop like that is interesting, but when they're all against white culture, how is this not discriminatory if one workshop after another is against white Europeans or white society or white supremacy or whiteness? And lastly, Intersectional and Trans Inclusion in Feminism, Womanism by Pauline Yu. And this is a teacher, so I'm reading her name. We are creating a space for feminists and womanists to gather, consciousness raise, share stories, and celebrate our accomplishments against supremacist ideology, toxic exclusivity, and strategize against the challenges we face now and in the near future. Toxic exclusivity. So it's against toxic exclusivity, but it's very explicitly for feminists and womanists, which seems, once those movements go to their extreme, once feminism loses sight of equality and starts to advance superiority, then it's discriminatory inherently. And there's a line that happens. There's a line where equality, where the movement towards equality surpasses equality and starts to become superiority. So this is I'm reading this document, I'm linking this in the description, and that is the event that the college refuses to think of as discriminatory in any way, shape, or form. Back to John's letter. The college took reasonable and appropriate steps to engage with protesters during spring quarter, de-escalate conflict, and keep the campus safe. Now that's a whole other issue. That's a whole other episode, and there's plenty of media on that. I will contend that, but not in this video. I do want to say that John has a very interesting sentence. Later on in paragraph 3, he writes, "As we welcome students and faculty back to campus, let's focus on strengthening our academic community." This is a very complicated situation, but I wonder how strengthening the academic community is occurring by showing the world that we will not engage in discussion with somebody who disagrees with us, with Brett Weinstein. Brett Weinstein tried to have discussion about the Day of Absence, Day of Presence, about the Equity and Inclusion Council, which is a bigger issue than this Day of Absence, Day of Presence thing. I think that unfortunately, Day of Absence, Day of Presence has gotten all the attention, but what's more boring, but much more powerful, much more insidious, is the Equity and Inclusion Plan. And what Brett was trying to do was to have a discussion about that, and to have the blowback occur in this manner, I think, shows the college is making a move to show that dissent will not be tolerated. To quote George Bridges,
"They're going to say some things that we don't like, and our job is to bring them around, or get them out."
Right.
And what I hear us stating that we are working toward is bring them in, train them, and if they don't get it, sanction.
Right.
And you must, and I encourage you to hold us accountable to doing that.
Either you accept this training or you're kicked out or we'll silence you. And I think that this is exactly what's happening. I think George openly admits that to student protesters, and then they follow through with that, with this settlement. So they want to strengthen the academic community, revitalize our curriculum, and advance our equity initiatives to become a more student-ready college that is welcoming to all. I take issue with this. Everything that I've seen about equity is that it is not equality. Equality is something that's welcoming to all. Equity is not that. Equity is silencing certain people so that other people can be heard. That's what equity is. And if you look at the poster advertisement for the Day of Absence, Day of Presence, it says, "Your silence will not protect you. Revolution is not a one-time event." And I think that what they're teaching people is that the world is broken and you need to violently change the way that things work. And how you do that is by centering race in how you evaluate somebody's character. That the color of their skin is more important than character. And that I think that Evergreen wants to make a picture of itself as welcoming to all so that they can get that juicy middle American money and to get those students in. But once they get in and once their checks are cashed, then they're submitted to this equitization of their education, this equitization of their own self-worth. And so his statement that advancing our equity initiatives to become a more student-ready college that is welcoming to all is a case of very willful hypocrisy and doublespeak.